Okay, so first thing I wanted to do, how many have their first step of their models ready today? I saw you submit one. How about the rest of you? Your assignment was to write the first and smallest part of the model that you want to build for today. And the reason why I'm asking you that is I'd like you to show us what you did.
So I tried to make a model about the crowd flow during mealtime in our campus, because I saw people always crowded to McDonald's and there's always a very long line, and I don't know why. So I try to simulate the situation. So I create two special breeds. One is called customers and one is called restaurants. And each restaurant have like some kind of strengths. Like if they have a lower price, maybe some customers tend to go there. And if their flavor is high, means their food are delicious, then maybe some other customers will go there. And each visit of customer to restaurant will create some revenues for the restaurants. So these are the first batch of variables I set for these two breeds. And I have created some variables for these restaurants and customers, but I haven't used them in my first version of model so far. I just set their shape and put them randomly around the map. And what I asked them to do in each iteration is I ask customers just decide which restaurant they are facing in their acceptable distance, because I think distance may somehow influence us that where should we go. Yeah, we don't go to the restaurants, they are too far. So here is the effect of this model. Yeah, so I first randomly set up some customers and restaurants on the map, and if we go once, each person, they will face a specific restaurants random in their acceptable distance. If there is no such restaurant, they will go randomly. Yeah, so it just works like this. Some customers are getting around into some restaurants, and while some other customers are just idling. Maybe they just don't know where to go. Yeah, something like this.
Yeah. Good. So can you go to the code? I want some of you to note he's creating variables for them. He's not using them all yet, but he has a sense of what are the factors that influence the behavior of people. And so he had lists like how much it costs for people we call that cost sensitivity. And some people are they want to be very clear about how much they spend. And most often that means reducing the price. Cheaper is better. Flavor is a second consideration. What kinds of tastes do you like? Also then the revenues that are set for restaurants, right? How much restaurants clearly want to make money, and they set price on that. Now, how all of those variables play into this is up for grabs. But by doing this, the way he set it up, he has the ability to change the values for any one of those and experiment with the impact that lowering or raising prices might have, experiment with buying higher quality food items, or how much money does a restaurant need to make in order to be successful, right? How high a price can they request? Because this is a marketplace, and if there's high demand for their food, they can ask for more money. And if there's low demand, then they lower their prices. And so this is a nice environment. He sees a phenomenon, he sees crowds in some places, and he wants to know what makes people willing to move into those crowds. I also like the one distance one, which is, I actually would think of that as kind of like the laziness factor. Some people will just go to the one closest because it's most convenient, and they don't really care. Food is food, right? And that seems to me to be a really interesting consideration in this model as well. So after that, he has, I think if you scroll down to your iteration component, he's getting some weird behavior. Like he mentioned, some of his people are just moving around randomly. And I think part of that is he's used code that's made them move around randomly. Jack was using the term in radius acceptable distance. So that in radius acceptable distance is determining how far away they can look to identify a restaurant. And if their random movements don't get them close enough to a restaurant so that they can see it and move toward it, they're just going to continue to wander around. And that's probably not a behavior that we want in the model. And so that's going to have to be fixed. But the logic of how he's getting them to move at the outset is solid. It's sound. He's on the right path for getting that. So I think that is a very good example. He's looking at a phenomenon that's complicated, right? If I ask you to explain why people are moving in this room the way they are, the number of reasons is many, and so finding some kind of insightful explanation is difficult. And this kind of modeling is exactly the kind of modeling you want to use to explore exactly this kind of behavior. So it's a very good choice of the kind of thing that this is helpful with. So thank you. Thank you very much.
I have some comment about your model. I think if you are going to do further, you might consider the time effect. Because when we go to eat fast food, sometimes during the lunchtime or dinner time, so if it's possible, you also set out that kind of factors. And so then another factor to affect the people are willing to stay in line or to looking around. Because sometimes we don't want to wait too much time. So just kind of suggestion you can consider.
I actually plan to do this, to add the waiting time.
Yes.
So, I actually also thought about to adding waiting time factor into the models, but it's not my first step to describe the behavior. Yeah. But I'm planning to do this. Yeah, because I don't know why people are just so crowded and so fascinated to McDonald's. It's always a very long line now. Yeah. Waiting time is also will be one of the factors in my model. Yeah.
Who else has a model ready they want to show? Doesn't have to be perfect. It's just a start. Yeah, if you don't have a model, I'd at least want you to talk about the idea behind it and any questions you might have about getting to this first step, getting this first piece done.
Hi, Professor. Actually, at first, I would like to maybe construct a model about the migration pattern of some of the historical incidents or in Southeast Asia or maybe. But now I would like to change my topic because last Wednesday I heard a seminar and then the lecturer thought about, why is the Hakka language retention is not so effective as they thought. Like they thought after the setting up of the Hakka Affairs Council and with a lot of policies, the Hakka language retention should be very smooth. But now, like maybe she said maybe if there is some other threats, or maybe we are, for example, our college staff getting new students for 5 years, and then after that they will have the sense of threat, and then after that maybe the protection of the language, or their sense of to protect the language, or the sense of retain the language will be greater. So I think, is it possible if I use this topic to construct a model? Yes.
Just a couple observations. So the way you explained it, it is a question of language acquisition, right? That is, how quickly and how well do people, agents, acquire a language, right, over time, or learn a language?
No, because there is no desire for them to speak this language in their daily life. Yeah, because maybe the background is like there's other dominant languages who make them actually feel like Hakka language is not so important. Maybe this is my hypothesis, I'm not sure. But they say if there is some sense of threat that, oh, our language is losing out, so maybe they will have the awareness to protect or to retain their language.
Okay. So now, in that kind of modeling, you have an individual, and their main variable is like a language option. And remember, we had choosers that allow you to switch to options. Hakka, and is the alternative Mandarin? Okay, so the question is, does this person start by wanting to speak Hakka most of the time? Or do they start by preferring to use Mandarin? Which do they choose? Which is their default? And then sometimes they're willing to switch based on some set of factors. And so think about the variables that lead them to want to go one direction or another. Positive means yes, no. And then you create a list of triggers that push them this direction or that direction. Like, what's one, you went through and listed a bunch of reasons. Those are all variables that you can set at different settings and then have them impact an individual and watch whether or not it nudges them negative or positive. So what was one example? I think you said Hakka under threat. Am I right? They feel like their culture or language is endangered. That could be one variable. But suppose the situation is really difficult and very demanding if they try to speak in Hakka. At what threshold do they do it anyway, or do they refrain from doing it? Right? So what might another variable be that affects that? This one is that Hakka is under threat. What was another one your professor said might be the case? Reason?
Not my professor said, but she just threw out this question, and then we think about it.
And you think about options.
Yeah,
so those were your ideas.
Yeah, and for this, like Hakka under threat, like maybe it has the dominant language who suppress it. Is this another trigger, or is under this trigger? The power of Mandarin language or dominant language who suppress their desire to speak Hakka.
Does the dominant, are you saying like if you speak Hakka, Mandarin speakers are going to look at you as inferior?
Maybe, but I'm not sure about the condition now.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. It was, I think, before, maybe 40 years ago, but I'm not sure about now.
Not sure.
Yes. And another trigger might be the socio-economic factor that you have to learn Mandarin in order to use it in your workplace or talking with your peers. And I read about another article that said that the parental exogamy, like intermarriage between two ethnics.
So if you think about this, you have an individual who's trying to decide what restaurant to go to, and he has all of these variables that is influencing the behavior, and ultimately decides to go to one restaurant or another. You have someone who's trying to decide what language to speak in a given situation, and you have all of these factors that may be pushing them one direction or another. And it could be even further down the road that's not true for everybody. Some people, the socioeconomic factor is going to be they're going to think that's more important than another person. And so they will react to this differently than another person might. Because, people are diverse. They vary. So that, if you think of your model that way, it's very much like that restaurant selection. It's just language selection depending on situation, right? So this is always one of the nice things about this modeling. When you think about it as a model, it forces you to think about it in a certain way. And so the rules that govern the kinds of things he's looking at choices can tell you something about how you might decide people are making choices as well, right? And from the computer's point of view, it doesn't care if it's about restaurants or language usage. It handles the rules and everything else the same way, right? You just give me the content and the data turned into numerical values, and I process it for you, and we'll see what the results are. So, and the nice thing about this is you get to experiment about this as well, because it'll help you decide oftentimes what the most important factors are and what are less significant. So that if you change the marriage partner influence, it has next to no effect upon what language people choose. Then you say, I thought that would be more important than it actually seems to be, based on what my model is telling me. And you can learn that as well, right? So, yeah, I think that's, if the question is, can I do that, that is a very doable model. Now, what's the smallest part of that you can build?
Create tortoise. And
Create what?
create tortoise.
Yes.
Yeah, and then.
But they're going to be a breed, right, of some kind?
Yeah, breed. Okay. Language.
And language, you're going to have a variable system. Mm-hmm. Well, no, let's put it differently. If you're creating breeds, mm-hmm. and the only two choices that you're making are, I prefer to speak Mandarin or I prefer to speak Hakka, then you can create two breeds. The one breed is Hakka preference and the other one is Mandarin preference. And you can color code them, right? If they're brown, they speak one color. If they're green, they speak another language, right? And then after that, you want to begin to talk about how these things influence them. That means you're going to need a variable system. So the same way Jack built up a set of variables, even though he wasn't using them yet, he was trying to define what considerations are going to play into the fact that these two different breeds are going to be making decisions and taking actions based on that. So the next thing is to figure out what are the most important variables that I can think of right now and define them. And then in the go procedure, you're going to have to get your turtles to start doing something, right? You're going to think about it. How are you going to put them in situations where they have to decide what language they're going to speak? What's the best way to do that in the modeling? Suppose I grew up in the world, or I grew up in my family, and we all spoke Hakka at home. Now, I go out into the world, and I run into a situation where they clearly want me to speak Mandarin, but I don't feel confident in my Mandarin speaking. And I have to make a decision about whether or not I should try or not. How did I get into this situation? Because when I was in my family at home, I never faced a choice because we all spoke Hakka. But now I'm out in the world interacting with a bunch of other people, and suddenly, oh my gosh, I have to decide something. How do I get myself from my family out into encounters with people who aren't Hakka speakers? What's the best way to do that? See, one of the ways, let me just give you a couple of examples. One of the ways is you have a turtle that moves. And so choices are going to be represented spatially. They're going to be situated in spaces. And therefore, my turtle needs to leave. Home is going to be this little spot here, and then out here in the rest of the world, there are all these other places like here and here where they're going to ask me to try to speak Mandarin. And as a little kid, facing these choices for the first time as I leave the world, I go out and wander around, and I go to this area here, which is a playground. And at the playground, I encounter people that are speaking both language. So here is that turtle that starts here and says, given in this situation, what am I going to do? I could do this, I could do that. And the decision that this turtle makes is a matter of what's happening in its environment and what its own personal preferences are. So it's going to do something. And then it goes back home. Maybe it says, oh, they're speaking a strange language, and run back home right away and hide from it. Or maybe they go out and do this. See, what you're doing then is you're using movement of those turtles to represent situations where people have to make choices. But movement is only one way in which you can make agents interact with each other. Jack chose movement because they're trying to get to restaurants. But remember the fire model had no turtles in it at all. That was all about fire moving through the world. There wasn't a single agent in there. So you could potentially build a similar model only using relationships in this grid based on patches and who you're close to. We're going to actually see an example of this when we study segregation today. So really, in that context, space and movement isn't the factor. It is going to be, say, proximity to somebody else. You're not using space to determine when someone is making a choice. You're using some other variable or some other dimension of the model. Right? That's an early choice you need to make to decide how you're going to do it. I know people who build two models. Whenever they decide to make one model, they build two models. One is by approaching it spatially with turtles, and at the same time, they build a second one where they're trying to do the same thing, only using patches. And they decide which one is making more progress toward doing what I wanted to do. Right? That's a choice. So you need to answer those questions and then start building a model, right? Start building, if you're going to use movement, use movement. If you're going to do connections between patches, you can do that as well. I had another one, which I haven't been teaching the class, that I was showing Professor Pan that had to do with links and the strength of the links. All of those are different ways to model phenomena. You need to choose what's most appropriate for yours.
Hey, Professor, can all the triggers be examined in the same model?
In the same
Model? Yeah, because you have a lot of
Yes.
triggers.
There's a model similar about language change,
Language change.
but this is similar to social networks.
It is. See, what you're looking at here, he looked at a model about social networks. And if you look in that, it has to do with who you're connected with. And one of the things that you're talking about here in this is you make your mastery of different languages depends upon who you're connected with. And so I think his point is that you can use all of those different factors. When you're building your model, you should start only with the first one, right? You can have all the variables listed there, but for now, just start building a world where people are feel like their their culture is threatened. And therefore, they want to strongly defend it under all circumstances. Then add a second variable, like what language is spoken at home, right? And ask yourself, if they learn this language at home and they also think that language and that culture is threatened, those are two really powerful motivations to not want to use an alternative language in their everyday daily life. But then, think about if you have a grid here, and so this line here, this matrix, it's basically a matrix of home, and then what was the other one we were just talking about? Home, and then threat perceptions, right? Goes this way and goes this way. So if threat is, we'll just go yes, 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 no, 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 yes, no, so it's no, yes. Those are the four possibilities of the way those two variables interact, right? So you ask yourself, add A to B, which equals C, how does that result in that thing's behavior? Let's just say it's simple, it's a one-to-one thing, and so every yes-no is going to result in 1 minus 1. Every yes-no is going to result in 0. But 2 yeses is going to be a plus 2, and that means under no circumstances are they going to try some other language, right? And under a negative 2, it's going to say, my God, I have to learn. I really, really need to learn Mandarin well if I'm going to get ahead in life. I'm desperate, right? I want to go somewhere with my life. I don't want to be limited to a cultural isolation. I desperately really need to expand my horizons. So in that case, now you've gone all the way up to 2 factors. Add 3 factors to that, and it's going to expand the matrix even further, right? Did I get that right? Yes. And you're going to have to add all of those additional factors in. Think about all the different permutations. I'm going to show you a way, once you've built your model and you have this framework put into it, you're going to be able to tell your model to try every one of these combinations for you and report on the results, right? There's a way to tell your model to take this variable and set it at yes or no this variable at yes or no, and then let the model run for 1,000 steps and see what kind of change it produces, right? There's a way to do that so that the computer does the work for you. And ultimately, that's only at that step are you really learning something from your model, because you have a big range of behaviors and performances that you can compare, right? All right? But we're going to start, if you're only just starting the model, only build it for one variable, and then you can make it more complex later. Okay, who's next?
I have read a study on household registration in the Qing dynasty, which used the streetings segregation model. So the researcher used the streetings segregation model in attempt to simulate the phenomenon of ancestral home population segregation in Taiwan history. So I would like to try to use this model to test the changes in ethnic mobility in the bamboo paper industry in Taiwan during the Japanese colonial period.
Okay. That's a great thing about historical models, is you know what actually happened, and so you can build the model, and the one test of the model is, does it look like what actually happened historically? And if it doesn't, then you can go into your model and tinker with it until the model looks more like what actually happened. You have real world data, and we're going to talk about this maybe today. You have a reference world that your model will try to imitate or simulate, and that's a really good thing. The other thing about it is, because of that time step part of this, you can show change over long periods of time. And so any social dynamic during a historical period, you start with kind of the conditions at the beginning of your historical period, and then you set the end point at, I suppose, in your case, 1945, and you're going to try to recreate that historical period, right? So does it, when you start the world, does it look like the world of, what year is it, when did Japan occupy Taiwan? 1899? 1895 to 1945. So does your model look like it does at the beginning, and then does it look like at the end? That really ups the credibility of your model. You can also use it, this is the great thing, really great thing about that, is you can also use this model when you're teaching history of this period, because you can give the model to your students and ask them questions we call in modeling, what if? And these are alternative history models. So you start and you ask the question, what if this was the way things were when Japan tried to colonize Taiwan? Would they still have colonized it? Or does the model show that they would have been stopped? Or you can change something about the model, and even though they invade, the nature of the way in which they ruled or governed Taiwan changes dramatically. And the students get to explore that, right? And think about, it's not just how history happened, but it's also then playing with why it happened the way it did. Can I modify the history so that the world that we saw never came about? Let me see. We play these games, historical games. Probably most of you know Hitler tried to be an artist when he was in college, and he had no success. And he left that world kind of bitter. looking lost and looking for something new. And one of the things that he found was this new philosophy of National Socialism. So suppose, instead of his being a failed artist, suppose he was a successful artist. Would the Nazi Party have ever still formed if he had been a good artist? Or does World War II just completely go away? Or another question is, Hitler himself actually was part Jewish. He had Jewish sections in his family, and that influenced him. If he had had no Jewish relatives, would he still have been so anti-Jewish, or was that because of some other factor? So you can come up with any historical scenario and you build the model of it with all of these variables, and then you let students play with alternative versions of the history. The goal of that is not to just think of, in the end, to think about, well, it could have been this way or it could have been that way, to get them to appreciate how certain factors end up being really important and other factors less so important. And sometimes the way we were taught to think about it isn't the way it actually happened, because some other factor was way more important than we actually thought it was. Right? Those are interesting scenarios. A friend of mine did one about a war in the United States and one big battle. And this one part of this battle that happened had to do with the fact that a train got through to the one side of the war, the one army that was fighting the other army, and gave them supplies. And they fought the rest of the battle with those extra supplies and ultimately won. Now, you can ask the question, did they win the war or this battle because that train got there? Or could they have won that battle if the train had never gotten there? And so it made no difference. And you force students then to ask themselves questions like, how do I go about studying something like that? Right? And these models help them to do that, and they learn history better because of it. All right, I'll be excited. Do you have anything yet that you've done with that?
No, I tried to simulate another model by that researcher.
You're looking for a model that's similar to that right now. Who's next? You want to go?
My idea?
Your idea for your model.
My personal problems is about the Hakka ethnicity. Livelihood is the major in fishery. It is the contrast to the stereotype in Taiwan. The stereotype in Hakka, their livelihood is about the mountains, about the mountain livelihood. There's many historical reasons about they learned from Hokkien, because Hokkien is a good apt to the fishery. Now in Taoyuan shoreline, there are many Hakka peoples who do the fishery. So I will to explain how the Hakka people do the fishery. The models I guessed about the two turtles, one means who can do fishery, who cannot do the fishery. But after they confront the turtle who cannot do the fishery, it turns into he can do the fishery.
Yes. So you have them interacting, and then one is learning a new career. What happens when they interact with each other that causes one to adopt a new career? What do they do with each other so that one person decides to fish and the other person decides, no, I still don't want to? that again is the same thing where I'm asking, deciding to speak Hakka. Yours is deciding to fish. And then you have to figure out what are the factors, right? So I think that's also a good model to work on. And I think I understood you're going to build two populations. One population of turtles are going to be Hakka, and the other population of turtles is going to be Hokkien? Okay. And the goal of this is to show the factors that determine, that encourage some Hakka people to become fishermen, and that then undermines the stereotype that Hakka people don't do this. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct.
Okay. Well, I think you, hopefully today has given you some ideas to at least start the first part of that model. Okay? Okay, so who else wants to talk about their model or what they want to do? We have 3 people left.
Here, this part, this side,
That side.
this side.
This is important because I want you to begin to take steps to do your own work rather than hearing me talk about work other people have done. So I want you to actually get busy taking your first steps toward making something that's really genuinely yours.
The phenomenon I chose is lexical diffusion. I find a Taiwanese field research. A scholar analyzed the lexical diffusion. And the scholar used multiple methods to describe the language system and basic word. And I consider that using my model can describe this phenomenon in different way to recall Hakka localism more quickly and external database of Hakka language. But I have no idea what level I can reach. But I choose language change as my reference model.
What question do you want to answer with this model? Another way to say it is, what do you want to know that you don't know now about the phenomenon you want to model?
因为我找到的研究是在六堆地区的客家方言点，就是那边的方言点关注的问题是，方言会随着那个地区的人民交流而产生混淆的现象。对，然后我现在没有答案，但是或许我想说可以再找更多。
不是，老师的问题是说，你想要知道什么？你看到了方言点，然后你看到了混杂现象，可是你想要问什么问题？你想问说为什么会这样呢？还是说它会怎么样的发展？就是你要先有个观察的目标。那你最好奇的是哪一个点？
我好奇的是可能不同区域，
不同区域什么？
就是可能不同区域的方言点
会长成不一样。
对，可能会有不一样的现象。
She is curious about some specific location about the Hakka language changes. Sometimes this language has kind of mixed, 混杂，对不对？
对。
Has been mixed with other kind of language. 是吗？
对，就是都是客家，但是是不同语系。
Okay. In Taiwan's Hakka, we have different Hakka.
At least
5 sects.
dialects.
Yeah, we have 5 dialects within Hakka. When people say he's a Hakka, then people will ask which dialect you speak. Okay?
Really?
True. Yes. So that is how we call intro-ethnicity phenomena.
Like they normally they will have some intermarriage, although they are Hakka, but they speak different dialects. So her question is, in some specific location, then people tends to speak Hakka mixed with different dialects.
Okay.
Okay? So she wants to understand maybe in some specific place may develop some specific pattern, and in other place might also develop a different pattern. She wants to observe why, or why and how, right? Your question is why this kind of pattern developed and how it will change the life.
I want to describe the process, how the
Of course,
different-
description is the first, but then besides description, maybe you want to ask why this kind of situation happened and how this will develop, right?
Yes.
That what she's saying is important. Describing something that you're seeing is really important for the model, but its usefulness is that you can explore why it's happening and begin to explain what you're seeing. Do you mean place literally, as in a specific place, like a town that you have in mind?
你有一个特定的地点吗？六堆。
六堆。
Yes, there is in South Taiwan. That's called 六堆. That's Hakka town.
Okay.
In Hakka village, right? Yeah. It's a very traditional Hakka village in South Taiwan.
Two things that you need to do. One is find out what is unique about that village. How is it different from other places that also show similar traits? Is it population size? That is, it's very small. Are they densely populated, or is it spread out? How isolated are they from the rest, from other cultures, or are they a small group within a much more diverse world, but they still have control by them of their own area, right? Like in the United States, we have different parts of cities that are named based upon what ethnicity dominates. So we have, in Chicago, there was a neighborhood when I lived in Chicago, an area called Little Italy, because everybody, the dominant population was Italian. But in addition to that, it had very definite boundaries. You knew when you were in Little Italy and you knew when you were out of it, even though all around it were other kinds of populations. So is this place part of a larger population, or is it isolated geographically? Once you find out what is unique about this town, you need to ask yourself, what factors do you suspect, do you think might be at the root of their cultural isolation, or cultural coherence is really what you're after, not isolation. Why are they so Hakka, right? What is it that makes them the way they are? Because there are likely to be more variables than you could possibly identify and incorporate into your model, you have to ask yourself, from all of these unique factors, which ones do I think are the most important? And then pick a small number of them. Say like 3. Okay? Find out, if you have a specific place in mind, find out what makes that place unique, and identify 2, 3, 4 factors, like the traits that are unique, and build your model using those.
I think the model we learned last week, the heroes and the crowds, is that helpful? Because we have some like a brave and a mixture and
Coward.
Coward. Okay, so we have 3 types. So we can change to like dialect 1 and dialect 2, and then another is mixed with dialect 1 and 2. So maybe.
Or as many as you want. You can do it with 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5.
Yes. And then we can have like a 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, something like that. So if you build up this kind of prototype, then you can go to different hackathons and then to find.
You could, yeah. From there, you could go to other places.
Yes, and then just to do it. 听懂吗? I would like to test the most classical concept in economic sociology. First, I would like to test the called rational model. Everybody is economical, rationally person. So when we are doing the exchanges, we only want to make the best of our profits. So then see how it goes. This is the first things I want to see, okay? Then, because Scott Carplany says, if we are doing this, then that will destroy our community and our environment because people will use all the resources. So if I can build that kind of model to have some resources, some trees, some good environment, and then put down the model of economic means model to see how it goes, how the environment will be consumed. So that is the way to test of the argument of the economic sociology. We also have the very important concept called embeddedness, which has been provided by Mark Granovetter. So that is developed from the strengths of weak ties. Then he say every social behavior, including the economic behavior, is a social behavior. So when we are doing the transaction, we are based on the social context. We are based on the social relationship, not only based on the economic model. So then he just going on to that. And then further going on is, go back to the strength of the weak ties is, we also have a theory called structural whole. The structural whole is when the existence of the two nuts. So, but if you have the bridge with the two nuts, it will make the things flow. So there is a hole between the two nuts there. So someone occupy that position. Actually, who is the one who can get the best benefit through the structure? Yeah. So then eventually we also have a concept called over-embeddedness. So this looks good, like it's very efficient, but if the time goes longer, this kind of structure may not be as efficient as before, because you might be just stuck into the network you have. So I don't know, this is a great idea. If this NetLogo can visualize this kind of a concept, I think that will be very helpful when I teach the economic sociology. I can show exactly how this works rather than just abstract the concept.
So that the stepwise process in which you described that, some of those look like extensions of earlier versions of the model. So you start with one version of the model, then you
Rational.
add something to it
Yes.
that makes it a little more complicated,
Yes.
a next layer of consideration,
Yes.
and a next one. So it could be that you're going to build a basic model and then add things to it. It may also be true, however, that it would make more sense to start to build more than one model. And so start with one model and add 2 or 3 factors and then stop and create another model that expresses specifically what the new question is addressed. Because in the end, models can't be stretched infinitely to all kinds of considerations. They become so complicated that even the user doesn't understand why it's doing what it's doing. Right? And that is a real danger because we want our models to be absolutely excellent. But sometimes simpler is better for the purpose of understanding and visualizing. So.
I have two situations. So one is about last time I shared you about Tibetans in Taiwan, right? So my observation is that they are mostly concentrated in the constructions and manufacturing industry. So I wanted to know why. So the variable view of like the possible reason, like one is an ethnic network, and another
Is what network?
Ethnic.
Ethnic network.
Yes, and then second is the salary, the payment is better than other industry, and thirdly is since many of them have initially come here as a not as a refugee, but they don't have the work permit, so it's easier to get job in that these two industry. The big and then another is there is a I don't know how to say this, control behavior, because many of the Tibetan they don't want to work in the restaurant and then also in the hospitality care industry, because they think that it's much that their bosses has much more control over them compared with these two. These two is like this, like we just come work, then we get payment, we work, like not much control. So these factors determine this behavior. So this is the model that I want to build.
That's very straightforward. You have a good list of considerations or conditions that could generate the outcome that you're trying to explain, why there is movement to these certain jobs and others. I guess one question I have is why you didn't choose education as a factor, because
right, yes.
yeah, it seems to me qualification for employment is very dependent upon educational level.
Yes, absolutely, it's there. I forgot to mention it's there. Yes. So another situation is, again, it's related to the languages, like Taiwan Tibetan family.
Yeah.
As I observed, the majority of their kids now they are like third generation Taiwan Tibetan. They don't speak Tibetan, even though one of parents is Tibetan. So the possible reason is they don't have any resources to learn Tibetan language, like language center, someone can teach them. And then another reason is maybe they don't have the pressure to speak Tibetan from their within their family. And third, I don't know, because they are like their schoolings all are in Chinese, so this is easier for them to speak, and then it's easier for them their parent to speak with them in Chinese, I guess.
Yes.
So yeah, so I wanted to build on that, but I'm not sure how to.
I think, were you listening to the other model? It's very similar not quite the same setting, but you can attack the same problem with your own unique set of hypotheses or considerations of what you think may be influencing language adoption or change. I do think, in my experience, when we're working with the segregation model, which will be coming up, cultural background, immigrant status has a direct correlation with wealth. And wealth has a direct correlation with job opportunity as well as educational possibilities for children. If you are wealthy, your children can go to better schools. And if they can go to better schools, that will have a direct impact on language acquisition. It will have a direct impact on their values that point them to think that they can get better jobs than their parents, or think, no, they don't want to. And it can get them to aspire to acquire languages that they think will make their lives better than their parents, right? So I do think, I would suggest ethnic groups live in enclaves, and they typically don't have access to the better paying jobs when they first arrive, especially the subpopulation where you're considering they don't have work permits. That really limits the work they can perform and how much money they can make, right? So I do think the more money you have, the better the education you can get for yourself, even in this day and age. Right? Mostly that has to do with the fact that if you live in an area where there are a lot of wealthy people, you can afford to do that. The schools there in that community are going to be better. That's, the parents demand it, the kids want it, the entire support structure is there to make the school more demanding, and will have more positive impacts on the children that are involved, including motivation to learn languages that are to their advantage. So I think wealth is a big deal.
Is there any model within our model library where it's...
Yeah, the one is, the popular one that I've had a couple people look at, the segregation model, is a big one. And that's on the list of models we're going to get to at some point here soon. But you can go and look at it right now, and it's in the models library. Segregation, I think it's under, well, it's certainly under, it's in the textbook, the models that the textbook uses. So, all right, Stephanie, last one.
因为我是想说有关观光的议题，就是对，比如说在我之前有在泰安那边，它就是一个山城，然后它有原住民有客家，可是后来变成它有一个商店街之后，里面的商店几乎都是外面的人，包括其他乡镇。那我其实比较好奇的是，如果这样一直下去都是观光客在里面，那到底在地的人会不会有一些什么变化？可能会搬出去啊，或者是怎么样的部分？那对于这些原住民的在这边居住，那他们跟这些外来的人，还有包括在地的客家，到底大家会有一些什么样的影响
？I think she specific mentioned in one place called Tai'an, where usually lived Aboriginal people there, and some Hakka, right? Some Aboriginal people and some Hakkas, and now they have developed their tourism. So then, but the major shops has been run by outsiders.
Oh.
Yeah, from outside, not the local people. So she would like to observe this kind of tourism, economic situation, what kind of influence brings to the local communities both to the Aboriginal and the Hakka people there, especially the Aboriginal there.
What kind of benefits it brings?
Influence.
Oh, okay.
Maybe impact.
Impact. All right. So there in studies of ethnicity and global travel, there's lots of research on exploitation of ethnically unique people, where wealthier people will pay to go to places where oftentimes it's people that are more primitive will pay to go and observe their traditional lifeways. And that tourism is kind of cultural tourism. And the thing that makes it exploitation is whether or not the people that are being observed are running it themselves, are getting paid for it, or are they being treated like zoo animals, where somebody else runs the zoo and makes the money and makes all the decisions. So there is literature there on culture tourism and economic exploitation. I don't know if that's the question, quite the question you're asking, but I am familiar with that body of literature, and it is an interesting place to investigate. I know it primarily about visiting Europeans visiting populations of peoples hidden in places like Papua New Guinea or Malaysia or Indonesia, especially when they have really unique burial customs. Let me give you one example. In Tibet, they have a tradition of something called sky burial.
She knows.
You know this sky burial?
Right?
Domino sky burial.
Domanos.
Okay.
She's better.
Well, sky burial.
天葬.
Oh.
天葬, okay. Sky burial.
Many Europeans want to go and observe this. And you can pay some Tibetans money, and they will take you to wherever this is happening, and you will stand there and watch the process of the body being dismembered and then being laid out for the vultures to consume. Under the best circumstances, the Tibetan that operates this tourism has asked permission, but sometimes they have not. And sometimes the Europeans go and they listen to the rules, and sometimes they do not. So that here you are, you're performing this ritual that's going to be emotionally very demanding and is a very important tradition or ritual for you and for your family, and you have all of these white people crowding in wanting to see, and sometimes very rudely trying to get in and take pictures from different angles. So in one sense, this is oftentimes organized by a Tibetan tourist company, so Tibetans control this, but there are clear exploitation dimensions to this. And also asking yourself, is there something wrong about one group of people wanting to watch the most sensational and sensitive parts of another group of people? What is wrong with our tourism industry if that is the basis for watching this? It can be, it is completely alienating, right, to come and watch as if people are animals engaged in, say, mating behavior, or engaged in some other kinds of behavior and dehumanizing people through the way in which you're looking at them, right? I would guess in your situation, going to watch Aboriginals in Hakka, we want to see them act primitive versus us being civilized. And part of that is because it makes us feel even more civilized. We say things to ourselves like, how could they ever live this way? And I'm so glad I don't live this way. And there is, rather than mutual understanding, there is kind of one-sided judgment, right? That's a well-investigated phenomenon. You might want to read a little bit on that and think about how it applies to your situation as you're building this model. Because my guess is that you have some Taiwanese who are not part of this ethnic group making money off of going in and intruding on other people's culture. It could be that the people who live there want this. It's okay if they're making money off of it too, if they're winning something from it. But sometimes they're not winning anything from it. Or they're not winning enough because they don't understand the economics. They're getting 10 Taiwanese dollars for every tourist, but the person running the tour makes 1,000 new Taiwanese dollars off of every visitor. And the local group isn't sophisticated enough to understand the economics and how they're being used, right? It's a really good question, and one that is troubling. It's a question of justice in our tourism industry. So, okay, all right. If you haven't built your model and taken the first steps toward having your model done, you need to do that soon and get it into the shared folder soon. I don't ask high quality model. I just want to see you that when the whistle is blown, you start trying to run. And so I want you to start trying to run. That trying is more important than getting it perfect, all right? I wanted to show you something here. So this is the model from the test. And I don't want to go over it or anything like this, but I want to show you something basic. Dolma and I were working on something else, and it reminded me of this. And I want you to remember this. Drive it home into your head. So you have, as part of the test, let me blow it up. You had to do something where I asked you to pick a set of patches from a world. Right now, according to this one, or at this point, right now, all the patches in this world are green. Now, I asked you to pick a set of randomly selected patches and change their color to brown. All right? If, say, just suppose, for example, you don't know how to do that. If you go out to the web and type in, open up ChatGPT, this artificial intelligence, and you type into there, how do I make a random number of patches turn brown, question mark. And the first time you do it, you might want to type in NetLogo. And then you hit return. It will generate a piece of code for you that you can take and directly plug into your model, it will give you the commands that you need to use to make a random set or a finite set of patches brown. If it doesn't give you that, so I'm looking at this, and based on how I worded it, I'm going to change the wording slightly to, let's see, Control V. How do I make random, see, a random set of 25 patches turn brown? And the other thing about this is once you ask it about NetLogo the first time, it more or less knows that that's what we've been talking about. And so it's going to assume that you're really asking questions about NetLogo. So it learns very quickly. It actually understands what the conversation is about. And if you type that in, I notice the difference between the question I asked and the more specific one that I asked. It now uses n of 25 patches. So remember, you were trying to figure out what's the code that I need for this because I can't remember it. What you need was n of 25 patches. So you need to learn to use, and you could have used it on your test, use ChatGPT as a coding tutor or coding helper. Right? Here's one more that I'll use as an example. What is the command to move turtles to random positions? Set random x coordinate, random y coordinate. Ask turtle set that. Random x coordinate, random y coordinate. So that's what it just spit out based on the question I asked. Now, if I hit Control C, and I go back to my model that I'm talking about here, take a look at what I had to do to get it to change its position. I'll put it down here. That's what NetLogo said, right? Ask turtle, set x, y, random x coordinate, random y coordinate. Identical. Alternatively, you can, of course, go to the dictionary, and if you know what you're doing, you would simply then type in set xy. And then you can go in and follow the code and code it that way in the dictionary. But ChatGPT is always sitting there, always waiting for you to help you if you need it. All right? Do it. I will warn you, but the big warning of this is that ChatGPT is doing it for you. And it may be that if this is all you do over and over again, that you are not really learning how to do it program for yourself because it's doing for you. Sometimes doing it the old-fashioned way by trying to figure it out and looking it up in the dictionary and writing it out for yourself helps you more. So it's not a question of that always do one or always do the other. But remember, if you can't figure out something one way, then try it a different way. Then try it a third way. Well, I still haven't asked ChatGPT whether or not it works. I still haven't Googled it to see whether or not somebody has tried to do this online and I can get an idea from them and then try what they did. All of those are useful things. So I want you to realize that ChatGPT, not only can it write essays, but it also can write code. It can write Python, it can write C++, it can write anything for you. Again, with the normal warning, remember sometimes ChatGPT just hallucinates, talks itself into believing something that isn't really true or real. And so just because it offers something, don't necessarily assume that it's by definition correct. It's mostly correct, but sometimes it's really just bizarre. All right? Look at how simple that is. Just type in the question, bam, get the answer. All right, so I wanted you to see that and remember that. Okay, let's go to Models Library, and I wanted to show you one of our models prior to this. You had something called a histogram. We had something called a histogram. A histogram are those things that look like this. It's an additional way to plot information from your model onto your interface. You'll find conditions. You saw it when we were doing the simple economy one, and it was plotting how many members there were at each economic bracket over time. Right? That was where it came up. But I want to show you, and remember, I'm showing you things that doesn't necessarily mean 2 weeks from now you're going to remember everything about what I showed you. But at least I want you to know that there's a way for you to figure it out, to do it for yourself. You want to go down to something, a file down there called Code Examples. And if you look at this particular folder of models, these are models whose purpose is to illustrate some part of the code system of NetLogo. That's all it's there for. Simple programs to show you how something works. And the one I want you to find is histogram example. If you click on it, it'll pop up the model and has an explanation. This shows you all the code needed for you to create your first histogram. So hit open up that histogram model. Remember, you can inspect or look at any part of your interface by dragging over that part. So click and drag over it like that. You see what I'm doing? I'm left clicking and dragging over some element in the interface. I click on it and then I hit edit. That brings up the model settings for that interface. This here is a histogram. If I click on it, drag over it, activate it, and hit edit, it's going to show me all the code that is governing the histogram. So, are all of you into the behind the scenes background information? These are the instructions on how to build this histogram. So you have the first piece of code is set a plot for the range of the value x from its minimal value, the minimal px coordinate, to the maximum px coordinate. So from 0 to whatever the biggest number can be value for x. And if you click on this, close that out, that number is basically whatever you set the size of the world to be. The minimum is going to be the lowest negative value. The positive largest value is going to be the maximum px coordinate. So more or less, you're building the range of the histogram that runs from left to right. If you look there, negative 30, positive 30. Negative 30 here, positive 30 here. That's the range of this interface because it's set to 30 and 30. The next one is to plot the y range, which is basically everything that goes from 0 up the y-axis. It says set plot at y the range of 0 to whatever the count of turtles is. The total count of turtles. And then the last one, the last element there says set the histogram number of bars. That is, how many subdivisions, categories do you want this range, negative 30 to positive 30, to be divided up into? Down below is more or less the pen, or is called the pen input, and it has the color of the input is going to be red. And if you want to change the color, right-click on that color. There, oh, it's a left click. You can pull that up, and I'm going to change that color to orange. So I'm going to hit orange, and then I'm going to hit OK, and you'll see the color in that block change. Then the question is, what's the name of this pen? What do you want to call whatever's being tracked? In this case, it's only going to be just the count of number of turtles. And then what the pen actually does is it makes a histogram of the x coordinate of all those turtles, subdivided into 7 bars. Okay, once you've done all that, hit OK, close out that window. Now let's look at the code and see what's going on here. In the code, it's clear all, so empty out the world, make 3,000 turtles, reset ticks. So to the whole world, all you got to do is make 3,000 turtles. Now, ask those turtles to right turn a random 360 degrees and move forward 1 step. That's the entire code, the most basic code you can have. The real learning process is understanding what you had to put in here. Okay, hit setup and hit go. Notice the code only tells you to make 3,000 turtles. Turtles get random colors if you don't specify, and they're going to have the default shape of a triangle or one of those arrowheads. And they're all going to be positioned right on top of each other at 0, 0. So on the left, remember the range is from -30 to +30. All 3,000 turtles at the moment are sitting on position 0, 0. This red, or should be orange colored bar, because we changed it to orange. Right there. When you hit go, all these things are going to start moving in random directions, and let's see what happens. Notice they're all spreading out over the whole frame. We set the histogram, we set the x coordinates. This entire length goes for the full length of from this point to this point. It's watching this realm, the x-axis, and then it's counting the number at any given moment, the number of turtles in each row. So each one of these rows that's 60 divided by 7, which makes it what? About 9 units each. How many turtles are there in the line from -30 to -21? How many turtles are there from -21 down to -12? Then this is going to be 0 somewhere and then positive this way. And each one of these bars represents the count of the number of turtles because we made the y-axis turtles. And this shows you that over time, a bunch of turtles moving randomly are going to be, over time, become randomly distributed across the entire world. And so you saw all those bars move from everybody at position 0 to spread out all the way. This is a very good way to illustrate certain things happening in your model. It's not the thing you always should do. Sometimes a simple plot works well, but other times this works well too. As a matter of fact, in statistics, if you were, I'm going to hit go, and I don't want it to be too complicated, but I want differences. To plot this is what you would call a normal distribution in statistics. So you draw your line, it goes like this, like that. That's a bell curve. So in any model like this, you're going to have the highest number of members positioned somewhere here, and then you're going to have a small tail here and a small tail this way. For example, in among 100 students in a class, the majority of those students, their grade is going to be concentrated here in the middle, right? And you're going to have then a few people who are failing the class and a small number of people who are just getting everything, right? That's a normal distribution. So histograms, that's what they are, that's how they work, and that's how you build them. If we go back one more time to this, set the plot, the range, how far it reaches of the x-coordinate from the lowest x-coordinate here to the highest x-coordinate. That makes your x-axis. Set your y-axis from 0 to the total number of turtles, the count of turtles, and we have 3,000 turtles. Remember, we just said create 3,000 turtles. And then we said divide up this entire area according to 7 bars. And if you look here, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Down here, you're typing in simply histogram of the y-coordinates of all the turtles. I'm sorry, the x-coordinate of all the turtles. Simple as that. That's what a histogram is. Remember, and I said we had that in one of the models. I wanted to make sure you understood what you were looking at. You may need this, you may not need this for your model. I want you to remember that you have this option as you're building your model, and if you need it, you can go and look at this example in the code examples part of the models library. Discard, yes?
I was trying to change the wraps, the all wraps, to see whether it makes difference, because now here it's wrapped.
Yes, the world, or that world, is it wrapped? I didn't look at the settings.
Yeah. When I go to setting, it's wrapped. So I just try to unwrap to see whether it is different.
And what happened?
Nothing.
Nothing? No, of course not, because they're moving randomly. That shouldn't affect anything if it's truly random movement, right?
Okay, because I thought it might have some differences, because it's supposedly unwrapped is out of boundary, right?
When it's wrapped, that means you go off one side and come back into the other side. So it's wrapped like that and wrapped like that.
Okay.
If you unwrap it, first off, you know it's unwrapped because these boundaries turn red,
Yes.
like a solid wall.
Yes.
Okay, we'll hit OK, set up, we'll hit go. This is an interesting question because you're working with a bounded space and it may impact the concentration of the number of turtles that happen at the outer rim of this distribution. So you may see this bar here and this bar here change.
Yeah, I think a little bit changes, but eventually you will equalize. But maybe the clicks will need more. I don't know, but then we can just try, because I think the only thing can make it difference is the wrap and unwrap.
Yes.
That's how I speculate, but
I'm looking at here with those, we've gone 1,400, 1,500 clicks,
yes.
and we're looking pretty normal, pretty random still. So I'm not seeing a huge effect.
Yeah, just curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. Sometimes you don't think it's going to make any difference, and it does. All right. Now, here's where we're going to actually learn a little bit about extending models. And so we're going to go to Fire Model, go to the models library, go down to the textbook folder, and chapter 3, go to the fire extensions. We did fire simple last time. Now I want you to hit fire simple extension 1 and open it up. Okay, if you remember, in the last model, fire simple, the way in which one tree caught another tree on fire was simply by being next to it. Now, that makes sense to me intuitively at one level. If someone is sick and they're standing next to me and they have COVID and they cough, I get it because they're close to me. But do I get COVID every single time? And the answer to that question is no. Sometimes I get lucky. And even though I could have caught it, I didn't. You call that probability. So the closer someone is to me, the more likely it is that I'm going to catch COVID from them, but it's not a sure thing. The modelers for this say, well, in the real world, just because a tree is on fire and another tree is standing next to it doesn't necessarily mean that the next tree is going to catch on fire. It seems likely. As a matter of fact, it seems very likely, but it's not an absolute rule. Sometimes a tree just gets lucky and gets jumped over in the fire. Is there a way in which we can get this model to take that into account? And the answer to that question is yes. But notice the word here. We're using the word extension. And so you have a basic model, and then you're trying to extend the model to take in one additional consideration. That's what that word extension is used for. So you have a set of models, and then first off you have the most basic one, and then you have an extension of it. Then you can have another extension of it. And that extension can be built on a prior extension, or it can have nothing to do with that another extension. But the idea is that you can build a series of models that do things that the original model couldn't. And part of building a model is all about trying to take it in new directions and seeing if you can and whether or not it makes sense. So in this particular model, all that it's done is introduced this new factor here called probability of spread. And as you know, when you add a slider, you're going to get this command thing behind it, just like a histogram. You're going to name it probability of spread. Remember, when you add a slider, you are creating a new global variable, and it has a range. What is its lowest value? It can be 0, up to 100, which is its maximal value. Because you're trying to determine the degree of likelihood of fire jumping from one tree to another for any specific instance, you're going to put it on a 100-point scale. And you're going to set the default value of that slider at 75, which is right there under value. That means 75% of the time, if a tree is a neighbor of me and I am on fire, then the neighbors are going to catch on fire too. 75%. it's likely that one of the trees next to me. In the first model, it said, if you are next to me, you catch on fire. That is, in other words, 100% of the time, you always catch on fire. But now we're trying to extend the model so that it says, most of the time it catches on fire, but a certain amount of time it doesn't catch on fire. So that in the real world, this model is more realistic, because in the real world, it's not always the case that proximity, closeness, leads to another thing happening next to us. Most of the time it does. So that adds that histogram to it. That places up here that global. Now notice the global isn't up there because you don't need to list the global up under variables at the top if you have created a histogram for it. Notice here there's no value for density. So if you highlight density and edit it, you're going to see again, it's created a global variable right there called density, but you don't need to declare it here because you've already done that in the interface. All right. Now, all you've done is created a new variable. You have to find a way to make that variable integrate into your larger model. To do that, all you have to do is look at a place where that global variable is mentioned. Here it says probability of spread. So what you got to do is go to your code and find out where it says probability of spread. That's embedded within a larger command structure right there. So you have to ask yourself, what does this one additional variable, when it's added to this larger command structure, what does it do? It says, ask the patches with P color equal red. That means all you trees that are on fire, I want you to do something. I want you to ask neighbors 4, so those are the 4 that are in the cardinal directions around you, with your P color equal green. That means an unburned tree. And then it says, if random 100 is less than the probability of spread. What was the probability of spread in the global? 75. This asks if a number that is randomly chosen out of 100, so what could that be? Any number that's less than 100. That, when it's choosing a set of numbers out of 100, randomly, 75% of the time, that's going to be a number under 75. That is, randomly, it's going to pick a number, and 75% of the time, it's going to qualify. So if random 100 is less than the probability of the spread, that means you now have the opportunity, you're commanded, set the color of that next patch from green to red. So all you've done is added an additional condition for setting something on fire by adding a probability that you decided at the outset. So if I click this, like this, I'll put 2 semicolons in front of it. That means it turns that piece of code off. Now, I hit setup and I hit go. Oh, there's something wrong. Oh, I can't just do that because that's built into the code. It's not going to set anything red, so I have to remove that entirely. Okay, this has been added in. Another way to do that, if I set the probability of spread to 100%, that's the same as not having that piece of code in there at all. Right? You understand that? When I set it at 75%, that means I have that 1 out of 4 chances trees are not going to catch fire. If I set it up at 100%, that means every time a tree that's next to a burning tree is going to catch on fire. That's the same as not having the probability of spread in there at all. So if I set it up that way, hit setup and I hit go, remember what happens. What was the tipping point for this? Where the fire spreads from one side of it to the other? The tipping point was 59%, 57%. I think it was 59. It's right there in that ballpark. Sometimes it makes it across, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, now I'm going to hit that. Now, let's check. Well, no, let's do it this way first off. With 100% determinism in this, let's see how the fire spreads. Fire spreads. Is it going to make it all? The big question before was, with that level of density, will it burn its way across? It made it a little more than halfway. And you're going to get those. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Now, let's see what happens when I reduce the probability that it's going to catch things on fire. What do you think? How likely is it that a bush next to another burning bush is going to catch on fire? How much? 80? All right, let's try 80%. All right, we have the same density, we have the same percentage, and remember, this is what we got the last time for the density of the fill-in. At 80% probability of spread, what impact do you predict it's going to have? Are you going to more or less get the same amount burned? Less, you think? How much less? Is it going to make a huge difference or not much?
I think it makes huge difference.
I would call that pretty significant. All right. That's an 8 out of 10. You want to set it at 8.5 out of 10? How significant do you think this time? By the way, that only got to 0.3% of the total area of this burned. Now, I've increased the probability of spread by just half of 1%. Let's see in what it does. Got up to 4.4%, but that's still pretty small. Remember, when this was turned at 100%, it burned more than halfway through. So it turns out that this is making a huge difference. Let's set it at 90% and see what happens. Look at that. A 100% means it's going to spread most of the way. This is a very small change that's resulting in a very big difference. I myself, I wouldn't have predicted this. And it's interesting to ask yourself, why is it that when you look at it, you wouldn't predict this, but I guess it's really true. Okay, I'm going to set the density at 75%, and now let's see how far it burns. Yeah, see that density makes it almost always burn. Remember, anything over 59 meant that it gets all the way across. So let's set this down a little bit to 70% or 68. Hit setup. All right, with a density of 75, but a really reduced probability of spread, what's it going to do? Let's see. No, I got 9.9%. But notice, it doesn't seem like these two things are absolutely related to each other. See, it could be just by making one higher and the other lower at the same increment that it burns more or less the same. But that's not true.
Actually, the result is a distribution.
It's a distribution.
It's a distribution, right? Because I just put the density and the probability of square constant. Then I just start to run. Then each time the percent burn has slight difference.
Yes.
So actually, it's a distribution. It's like more like a normal distribution.
There's a function,
Yes.
an equation you could write
Yes.
to determine this with
Yes.
those two variables built into it.
Yeah. So like each time is not the same number.
Yes.
Of percent burn. So we cannot see, okay, this time is small, but next time maybe a little bit more.
Right, and the reason why you run models over and over again is because just one model doesn't prove, one example doesn't prove anything. Two examples don't prove anything, but 100 examples may actually begin to show a pattern.
So then the question will be, how long we need to run the model until we can get some kind of constantly result?
Yeah. In statistics, don't you use a factor called degree of confidence?
Yes.
Right? And so you want to look, any statistic that you give, it's never perfect, but you want to get it to a range where you say, with this degree of confidence.
So it's the same logic, because this is more like the sampling distribution.
Yeah. So what you can look at is, this is a model that visualizes a process that could be handled by statistical equations.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
This is how I found out. So
Oh.
did a student understand what we are talking? Okay, let me explain in Chinese. 就是我如果把那个 density 跟那个 probability of spread 固定下来的话，那我就开始去跑那个 setup 的时候，它的那个燃烧的面积的比例呢，它就会出现一个数字，对不对？可是当我在按第二次的时候，那个数字不会是跟之前同样的一个数字，它会改变，因为它后面那个 model 都是一个 probability 的 model， 所以你每次都会得到一个数字，但是那个数字大概都是不会相差太多，所以最后那个数字出来的应该就是一个常态分配，而这个常态分配应该是往那个它的最终的，如果你做很多次的时候，它会往那个中间的那个平均数去集中。那这个就跟我们统计在做抽样推论统计里面的那个 sampling distribution 的原理是一样的。最后我相信它就是一个central tendency theory， 就是中央极限定律的过程。那我要说的是，我刚才问的问题是说，那我们做一次当然不够，因为那做2次可能不够，那到底要做多少次的时候，我们才会发现在这个 constant 下面它的 percentage burn 的数字就是那个非常精确的那个数字。那如果不能做的话，那我们就要用统计的那个信赖区间的方式去建构说，那么真正最后的那个 percentage burn 的那个数字落在哪个区间当中。So this goes back to the statistics.
The lesson is, you can't go wrong taking classes in statistics. It will always be useful to you in the long run.
That's true.
If you are working in any field in social sciences, actually in any field, you ought to, but especially in any of the social sciences studying culture, you should study statistics as part of your learning. Because it unlocks all kinds of mysteries about phenomena that you see like this. I strongly recommend that you consider that. All right, that was extension, was it extension 1? That was Fire extension 1. Now go to the models library and hit Fire extension 2. And if you read here, this will tell you that we're going to add a new consideration. This project simulates the spread of fire through a forest. It shows that the fire's chance of reaching the right edge of the forest depends critically on the density of trees. This is an example of a common feature of complex systems, the presence of a nonlinear threshold or critical advantage. Well, hold on, let me open this and see what it says. See, that's not the description of this. Okay, don't pay attention to that, just open the model. That is so strange. I don't know why it does that, because this is actually about adding the factor of wind to this. So, in the real world, right, proximity isn't a guarantee of transmission. Most of the time, the fire is going to spread, but not always. So the earlier extension basically included a probability of spread that you could play with yourself. Now this one adds to the model a consideration about wind, because fires burn through forests under the influence of wind in addition to all the other considerations. So let's hit setup on this and we'll use the default settings. The density is at 82%, so that means this fire ought to almost always burn from one edge of the forest to the other, right? That 0.5% burn that happens for all of these, just because this red line here is where the fire starts. Probability of spread is set at 57%, which is pretty low actually compared to what we saw in the earlier model. So that's still in there, but now we've added two additional factors. Wind that is blowing in from the south, the bottom, there's going to imagine a wind blowing from the bottom of the model toward the top of the model. And then we have a west wind that is also blowing, and it's blowing from the left side of the model to the right side of the model. So, as you might expect, when you have these two forces driving the fire, you hit go, and you're going to see that the model doesn't catch certain parts of the fire, of the world on fire, because it's being blown toward the north and toward the east. Right? You have this whole section that's been saved because the wind has spared it. Now, if we move probability down some, let's put it at an interesting value, like 70%, and set the probability of spread a little more realistic at like 80%, I think you're going to see the impact of the wind more this time. Well, no, maybe not. Look at that. Okay, well, let's set probability of spread a little lower. Let's set density a little lower. Hit setup, and then hit go. Oh, it burned out. My probability of spread's too low. There. That's kind of the classic run of this model, where you can see the impact of both how dense the model is. Remember, if that high 50s was the tipping point, I'm above the tipping point. So most of the time, this model will burn from one side to the other. The probability of its spread is 82%. So that means 8 out of 10 times a tree is going to catch on fire. But the wind is blowing from this direction and this direction, which forces the fire to go this way. Notice once the fire reaches this upper border, it's going to have to stop because it's run out of fuel. Basically, the forest ends at the edge. And so you get that kind of pattern. If you go to the code, and remember, you've added two globals, just like you did in extension 1. This time it's south wind speed and west wind speed. So you want to go down into the code and find out where those have been added. And it's all going to be integrated into this. Right here, this block of code. Remember now, we let probability of spread, let direction toward myself. If direction equals 0, probabilities of south-south wind, minus. Okay, so the probability of, you have the probability of spread. And you're adding to that the force of the wind. So let's just assume this is 80% chance of catching on fire. If I subtract the power of the south wind from that, what does that do to my 80% chance of catching on fire? It decreases it to 55%, which means any tree that is connected to that square that's on fire from the perspective of the south, the wind's blowing this way, all of those are going to have reduced probability of being caught on fire by the square that's red. Right? If I have probability of spread sitting at 80% with the wind speed at 25, no, let's do it a little different. The other setting was the wind from the west to east. If I change that, then the probability of spread in that direction is going to be that. Each one, 15 means 65. Likelihood of catching on fire. Because that is going from south to north, that's only going to impact those patches that are to the north and to the north and to a lesser extent to the west and to the east, because it's blowing the fire this way and blowing the fire that way. So you start with a baseline probability and then you reduce the probability based upon the impact of the speed of the wind. That's the meaning behind the code here. So if you read the comments, ask neighbor 4's, so you're asking the patches, just the patches here that are red. Ask red patches, look at your neighbors 4, and if they have a green color, I want you to, first off, create a new variable called probability, set probability of spread. Let direction be towards myself. That basically means that what they're declaring in this context. Have we done temporary variables yet? No. The let? Okay.
But then how about towards myself is default is the north of, right?
Yes.
I mean the direction is there, the default, like towards myself.
Towards myself, yes. So if it's coming toward me from whatever direction it is. I want you guys to know the difference between one more variable. Up at the top, right, up at the top, you have globals. And what made a variable a global? If you have a variable that's a global, that means every agent in the world can access that. A global variable can only have one value for everybody. A turtle specific variable is a variable that the agent that this is given to, turtle, has. It carries around with it, right? Global is something that the whole program remembers and sends to anybody that asks for it. Turtle specific is a variable that a turtle carries around with it in the world as it's doing its business. So every turtle will have its own specific variable. Turtle variables or patch variables or link variables are changed or modified by using the word set. So when you've been using this word, ask turtles, set P color or set color red. You've been saying, all turtles out there, whatever your color is, I want you now to change your variable called color to red. What that means then, every single turtle is walking around and in its memory bank, it remembers right now that it's red. So that exists in every turtle. Now, a let creates something called a local variable. And a local variable is a temporary variable that you are making because you need a place to store some value only briefly and right now. You don't need it to be remembered by anybody. You just need it to hold some number that you need within a procedure. So for example, I am asking Patches to look at neighbors with neighbors 4. If your P color is green, with P color green, I want you to create for yourself a temporary variable that I haven't declared anywhere else. Look up here. All the variable, I only have one global variable called initial trees up the top. So this variable down here doesn't exist anywhere. And so I'm inventing it right now. And I'm saying, let this variable mean for the moment towards myself. If that variable is 0, then set the probability minus south wind speed. Okay? Set probability, whatever the probability was, minus the south wind speed. Number of hairs on head, we'll say it's hair. And so I'll set the variable for turtles and say, hey turtles, set hair 3. And that means every turtle has 3 hairs on its head. Then I want it, with every step of the model, I want it to have one more additional hair. So what I do is I say set hair, which was whatever value it had before, plus 1, which is going to be 4, because hair prior to that was 3. So what this is doing here is it's saying, set the probability of spread, set it probability, whatever it was before, but subtract the speed of the south wind. And then it says down here, set probability, and notice how it's giving it a direction. So like if direction equals 0, what direction is 0 in the world? Do you remember? Direction 0 was straight north, straight up. So right this direction is going to be 90, to the bottom is going to be 180, west is going to be 270, and then back up to 0. So what it's doing, by setting the direction 0, it's telling it the wind is blowing to the north, towards 0. Or set direction 90, that means it's blowing toward the east. So that's a west wind. And by subtracting the speed of the wind, it's decreasing the probability that it's going to catch a tree next to it on fire.
One small question. You just mentioned about you have the probability plus the wind speed, right? But the probability is percentage, but the wind speed is kilometer, right? How can they add it and the
It's kilometer? Actually, it doesn't say what the wind speed is.
Yeah, but that's different kind of value, right? How can they
Yeah, no,
add and subtract?
it's using that number in the abstract. It's saying the force with which the wind is blowing is 25.
Okay.
But it's not saying it's kilometers per hour,
Okay.
right?
My question is, what is the probability? What is a number? So how can that be 8 to a kind of speed? I don't understand for that part.
Yeah, so that's an unrealistic part because it has to add probability, it has to add the force of the wind to the overall probability. How would you calculate the impact of wind speed? How would you convert that to actual probability numbers? And the end result is you can't, not really. So you have to come up with some kind of artificial measure for that.
Okay, because for me it's not right. If my student doing like this, I will say you are wrong.
No, I understand why you're doing. Mostly, it's picking a random scale, and saying, if you pick 25, that means, for the purpose of this model, that means high wind.
Okay.
And if you pick 0, that means low wind. Well, what is exactly high wind? Is high wind hurricane wind, typhoon wind? Or is it just like an everyday wind, or is it completely still?
I know it's just kind of modeling set.
It's model numbers.
Yeah, okay, it's model numbers because it's not happening in the real world. Yeah.
That's right. And that's a limitation of this model.
Okay.
It's completely worth bringing that up, right? To point to that.
学生知道我们在问什么吗？因为那个probability 是100%嘛，可是那个 wind speed 是一个速度嘛，对，然后他把它加起来作为一个那个描述的数字，我就觉得这两个是不同单位，是不同方式的价值嘛，所以我刚才才问那个问题嘛，就是这个在平常不可能这样加嘛，这样加就不对嘛，可是他说这就是因为要让这个 model 很好，他就让他这样子做。那所以这个也是这个 model 的限制。
风速这件事情，
因为它是风速，你要风速加比例，然后你要创造出一个去改变它比例的方式。
哦，所以就变成说，如果我让它变台风，那变成说它是100%，
对，我不知道，因为这个就是这个 model 你要让它去做，但我的意思在平常
那个比例什么意义上叫做台风？
如果你可以把它讲成说你往那边吹的几率是多少，你把它这样想就蛮合理的。如果你强风的话，那你就往这个往东边延超的比例变高，那就差不多意思。
风向呢？
对，就是你的风向，如果你把
风向吹过去的比例。
Let's speak English, okay?
So
you explain again.
So if you value out the west side wind, that means the probability to go east, the fire go to east will be higher.
Yes.
So
will be higher.
Yeah.
Will be higher.
You can seek as probability to burn to the east.
Yes.
Not the speed.
Yes. That I can understand, yeah. But the way it
right. It is trying to add apples and oranges to with each other. And one of the reasons for that is it doesn't know how to quantify math as a percentage and make these two things operate. All it knows is that if it blows from the west, it decreases the probability of burning the tree that's right to the east of it. And it's doing that by increasing the probability or improbability by adding or subtracting. That's all. Okay, so those are a couple of extensions to this. The last model for fire includes a consideration of, with windy conditions, sometimes fires can jump from one location to the other. So even though the probability exists that the next tree may or may not catch on fire, that doesn't mean the fire always goes out. Sometimes the fire jumps 2 or 3 or 4 trees and sets another tree on fire. And the fire blows even further. That's why fires under windy conditions are very hard to control. Firefighters never want to see fires during windy days because that makes their job much more difficult. And so that's the last extension of that. We have not done 2 other models in this chapter. I'm trying to think. Oh, the next one is this diffusion limited aggregation set of models, and the third one is segregation models. I really want to do both of those next week. So that means you don't have to do anything new for next week if you've already read that. All right. See you next week.